Ma'am, would you step into the witness box, please, and raise your right hand so that you can be sworn?
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony that you are about to give in the case now and should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Be seated and state your name and spell it for the court reporter.
This one? My name?
Yes. Yeah, that's the court reporter right there.
Oh, sorry. Andrea Skelton. Andrea Skelton, Skelton.
Now, we will need you to speak into a microphone so that all of the jury and everybody in the courtroom can hear you.
Okay.
So if you would pull your chair up a little bit and speak directly in, that would be great.
All right.
Yes, you get 2 microphones.
All right.
Good morning, Ms. Skelton.
Good morning.
My name is Jeffrey Feiger, and I'd like to ask you some questions about your observations in this case. May I have permission to do so?
Yes.
Thank you very much. You and I have never met before, have we?
No.
And we've never spoken, have we?
No.
And in this case, you were served a subpoena and asked to come. Is that correct?
Yes.
Your name appears in the record, and I don't know presently what you do, so perhaps you could start by telling us what is your occupation?
I'm a clinical social worker.
All right, and what is a clinical social worker?
I work with individuals that have psychiatric needs, substance abuse.
Okay. You don't provide medical care and treatment, do you?
No.
Okay. And how long have you been practicing? Is it called an MSW or something else?
Now I'm an LSCSW, which is
Okay.
a licensed specialist clinical social worker. I've been practicing 9 years.
Okay. Are you employed presently by anybody other than yourself? I mean, outside employment?
Yes.
Who are you employed by?
Women's Recovery Center, DECA, here in Wichita.
And what is Women's Recovery Center?
It is a substance abuse treatment facility for women.
Very good. And how long have you been employed there?
9 months.
Prior to that, where were you employed, Ms. Skelton?
First Step Counseling here in Wichita, Kansas.
Okay, and did you do the same thing, counseling?
Yes, individual therapy.
Very good. And how long did you do that for?
Year and a half. I
Okay.
think about a year and a half.
And before that, were you ever employed by a company named ConMed?
Yes, I was.
How long were you employed there?
1 year.
Okay, and in your employment at ConMed, where were you based?
Sedgwick County Detention Facility.
Okay, and do you know the 2 defendants in this case?
I remember seeing them.
Okay. Did you ever have any contact with them, either personally or socially?
No.
Okay. When you say you remember seeing them, what do you mean?
They were deputies in the jail, so I worked with them.
Okay. And in the jail, you were working on March the 10th of 2008. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I believe that about 3:45 or so, you were asked to see someone and examine him for mental illness.
Yes.
That would be a Mr. Terry Bruner. Who or how were you called?
We had
Who called you, and how were you contacted?
We received a call in the mental health unit, and of all the information that I remember, I cannot remember if I received the call or if somebody else in mental health had received the call.
Okay. And where is that unit?
It's in the jail. I can't remember if it's the first or second floor.
What time did you receive that call? If you recall.
I do not recall the time of the call.
Is it written down any place? Did you keep records in this case? About Mr. Bruner and your contact with him?
That was our first call, I believe, in regards to Mr. Bruner. So no.
So this was the one and only call that you received regarding him?
I believe.
Okay. And to your knowledge, there are no records that you made concerning that?
Correct.
Okay.
I haven't seen any of the records since the deposition, so.
Okay. Since the deposition, have you talked with anyone about this case?
No,
Did you talk with the attorney for the defendants?
no.
Okay. Do you recall what the call was about? Where were you when you received this call or got notice of it?
Right. We would have been in our office in the mental health unit, so in the office.
And you don't recall if you received it or somebody
Right.
else did?
That's of all of my things that I remember, that's the one that I don't remember if I received the call or if another person in the office received the call.
Okay. Who is it Lisa Armstrong?
Yes,
Who is that?
she was our RN on the mental health unit.
Okay. Is she the other person who would be involved with this? Or is it another person besides her?
Yes, I think it would be, typically it was her and I in the office during the day, so.
Okay. When this call came in, you don't recall if you got it or somebody else got it, right?
Correct.
What do you remember about what you did or what you were understood you were to do?
I remember when it was time for us to go on rounds, we typically did rounds 2:50, 3 o'clock, that we needed to see Mr. Bruner. We needed to, because the call had come that there were mental health, he could be having some mental health needs, so we were
Okay,
to go
so-
by there.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Are you
All right.
finished with your, I interrupted you, I apologize. Are you finished with your
Yes.
answer? Okay. So, you correct me if I'm wrong. You might have received the call like sometime earlier in the day, but nobody said you have to come right now. It was just a situation where when you finally got around to doing your rounds and that, at that time was when you were going to see him.
Yes, can you repeat that though one more time?
Absolutely. You didn't respond to an emergency. You were just doing,
Correct.
this was your regular rounds, and you had been notified. When you get around to doing your regular rounds, just drop in and see him.
Correct.
Okay. How long had you been in the jail by 3 o'clock? When did you usually start?
Oh, 9 o'clock in the morning?
Okay.
No, 8, I'm sorry, it was 8. It was 8 that we typically started.
8 o'clock in the morning. So if somebody had called you, you had been, so by 3 o'clock, you had been there 7 hours.
Correct.
If someone picks up a phone from the pod and says, look it, we've got somebody who needs help here, and we think it's a mental health issue, we want you down here to look at him. Do you come right down?
There were times, yes.
Okay, you're able to do that.
Yes.
Somebody, a deputy can call you, say, get down here right now, we got a
Yes.
problem. But that didn't happen here, did it?
Not that I recall.
Right. It was just that you normally do your regular rounds, and am I correct, you don't know who asked you to drop in and maybe see Mr. Bruner?
I don't recall, I don't remember on that. That's the one part that I have racked my brain to think of, and I don't remember that.
Now, you start your rounds at 3 o'clock, but I don't think he was the first person that you saw in your rounds, is it?
I don't believe so from you saying that it was 3:40.
Well, there's
approximately.
records,
That was
at least
3:45.
from other deputies that say 3:45.
Okay.
But we don't have any record from you, that's why I'm asking you.
I'm going to go with, I don't recall, but I believe that we saw him as the rounds were going, so I don't think he was I do not believe that he was the first one that we went to.
Got it. So you went around and saw, would you see people, would you go to each pod or the locations and ask deputies whether they needed to see somebody, or did you have a list of people that you had been asked to see?
We would see people on DDT, disciplinary detention, so we would see them, and then we would see suicide watches as well.
Okay.
Or if someone had any mental health needs while we were in the pod, deputies would let us know.
What was your understanding of why you were going in to see Mr. Bruner?
That he was having some bizarre behavior.
Now, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but, and you're not a medical person, you're a social worker.
Yes.
And you deal with therapy, but You walked into Mr. Bruner's cell, and you immediately knew it was obvious to you that he needed medical help just by looking at him.
Agreed.
Was it obvious to you he needed medical help?
Not the very first moment that we approached the cell, because it was myself, a deputy, and the RN, and I went up to approach him and ask him his name. So within probably being in the cell within 2 minutes, realized that he wasn't coherent, that he needed medical attention.
So the first thing you did was observe his condition.
Yes, the first thing I did was say his name or ask him. So yes.
Right. And that's what you do. The first thing is you observed his condition. Correct?
Correct.
The jailer takes you in, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did a jailer take you in?
Yes, the deputy went in first to
Who?
the cell. I want to say it was Bledsoe, Deputy Bledsoe. He went in with us.
Bledsoe, okay. And who is that a woman or a man?
It was a male.
Who is Deputy Bledsoe? Was he on the pod? I haven't seen his name before.
He just went in with us to the cell.
Was it your understanding that this deputy had some knowledge of Mr. Bruner?
No.
Oh, so he was the guy who went around with you for everybody?
Yes, we would get a deputy that would go with us on rounds, that would go with us.
I see, okay. And what was his job?
Safety.
Got it. So what would he do? You have to explain so we can get an understanding of what was going on.
He just also, we both said I said his name first, but he was just beside me, and he then said his name as well.
And did Mr. Bruner respond?
No, he did not.
Okay. Where was he, and was Lisa with you?
Yes.
Did she say his name?
Yes, Lisa noticed that he wasn't responding, and she's, RN, so medical too, as well as mental health, but she knows that he was not responding.
Did you or her, or both of you, realize at that point he was not coherent?
Correct.
Okay, and that he needed medical attention?
Correct.
Right then and there,
Because
by simply saying Mr. Bruner and looking at him and looking at his condition, you and Lisa knew he needed medical attention, correct?
Correct.
You didn't need to be a doctor. You're not a doctor. You didn't need to be even a medical person. You're not a medical person to know the person in front of you wasn't mentally ill. He needed medical help. Isn't that true?
Correct.
He was sitting or lying on the bed, do you recall?
I believe that he was sitting on the bed, and here is the bed, but his legs were up. It would be like if I was like this.
Got it. Could you, if with the court's permission, because I can't see back there, and I don't think the jury can, but we have a chair here. Would the court allow the witness to come down and demonstrate what Mr. Bruner was doing at that moment?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Get you a chair here. Perhaps you can come out here and show the jury what Mr. Bruner was doing. Okay. Okay, we need to scoot you back. Let's scoot that over here. Go ahead.
This is a metal bed with the legs for up here on the bed and the spot is very
Up in the air.
just like sitting on the bed.
Were his legs pulled up into his chest?
No, just out.
Were his knees lifted up?
Yes.
Okay, explain that to us. How were they?
Well, it's like if I was on a bed and I just had my legs up and I was just like crouched over.
Okay. Was it an unusual position? It didn't.
No, just like a rag doll, just
Okay.
limp.
Got it. Was he sweaty?
Yes.
Tell the court and jury, please.
His hair was just drenched, his hair.
Okay. Did he ever respond to you at all?
No.
Were his eyes, and I don't know if you remember, open or closed?
I keep thinking that his eyes were closed.
Okay. Was he making any sounds?
No.
Okay. Now, based on all those observations, you and Lisa Armstrong knew that he was ill and needed medical care.
Yes.
And so you left, really, and said, this isn't a mental problem. He needs medical care.
Right. We went out and went to the phone and called for medical to come up to get him.
Did you call, or did Lisa Armstrong
Lisa
call?
called.
Okay. And is that the last contact that you had with him?
Yes.
Did you ask, while you were there, anybody there, how long had he been like this?
I'm thinking back to that.
Let me preface. Go ahead.
No, because it was like we got to the scene and he needed attention, so we didn't ask a bunch of questions other than just to get him to the med clinic. I mean, that
Right, fast.
residence, yes.
Yes, in other words, you felt he needed to get some more medical attention fast.
Yes.
Normally, if you do an assessment, even as a social worker, you want to get a history of who you're dealing with. If somebody's depressed or suicidal, how long have they been acting strange?
Correct.
Okay, but in here, you thought it was such an emergency that wasn't an issue of getting a history.
Right.
You just wanted to get him care.
Yes.
Got it. And that was it, really.
Yes.
No. Did anybody come and talk to you afterwards? Any deputies or the sheriff's office or anybody say, we'd like to find out what you've told us here today?
No.
Okay. Thanks so much for
All right.
coming.
Thank you.
He gets to ask you
Oh,
questions.
okay.
Won't be too many. Morning.
Good morning.
Now, we did meet at your deposition, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. And that's where one of Mr. Feiger's lawyers in his office asked you questions at length about all of this. That's right?
Is that the other gentleman back there?
Well, might be. No, I don't think so. But there was another lawyer that asked you questions.
Yes.
Right. I want to see if I can't clarify a few things. First, it's been some time since March of 2008, and you're doing your level best to remember dates and times. Is that correct?
Yes.
But you're not here trying to say that your statements as to times are dead on, are you?
Correct.
Okay. Additionally, your memory in terms of the sequence on how you were contacted, let's visit about that. You remember there being some phone call at some time on the 10th saying, we have an inmate that needs to be viewed by mental health, right?
Correct.
You don't know if that phone call was earlier in the morning or later towards the afternoon, but just that the phone call took place.
Correct.
And then at some point, is it your memory that during the rounds that you were contacted and provided materials about Mr. Bruner?
I don't recall I recall verbal report. I don't require getting any paperwork on
But
Mr. Bruner.
it was a team thing, so it was you and Nurse Anderson, right?
Armstrong.
Armstrong, I'm sorry. And so I guess it's possible that if information was provided to you, it could have been provided to Ms. Armstrong.
Correct.
In any event, it wasn't until sometime in the afternoon that you went and saw Mr. Bruner, and by the time you saw him, he was, by your observation, in pretty bad shape.
Correct.
The statements that you had received, the limited information that you had about Mr. Bruner before, either in the phone call or whatever source, didn't prepare you for the idea that he might be in that bad a shape, was it?
Correct.
I mean, apparently at that time what's being communicated is that he had a mental health issue by the deputy's observation, not a medical issue.
Correct.
And you don't have any reason to know or think or believe that the deputies thought he would look like what he did when you got there when they first contacted you, do you?
Correct.
Now, there are some records that are part of Plaintiff's Exhibit 2, which are in evidence, and I want to talk to you about those. And the first one is a statement that you prepared. And I put it up on the screen, and do you remember seeing a copy of this statement?
Correct.
Okay, and it's dated April 2, 2008. Is that because you were asked at some time, well, almost 2 weeks later, put down your memory of what had happened before?
Correct. I believe by supervisor. So.
Okay, and I think this is basically what you said, that you were contacted, that with Deputy Bledsoe, he was there helping you go through the pod, and you were contacted to go do a welfare check on inmate Bruner at some point, right?
Correct.
Now, when you went into the pod for the welfare check, were all the inmates in their cells? Don't remember.
I'm going to go with I don't remember.
Okay, fair enough. Is it usual that when you do your welfare checks that the inmates will be asked to rack up, or will they sometimes be out?
Sometimes, but not always.
And your note indicated that Lisa Armstrong made the determination to have him seek medical assistance and contacted the clinic that the inmate was non-responsive to staff and appeared to need medical assistance. That's what happened, right?
Correct.
The call was Lisa's?
Yes.
There's another memo that's been provided that I think is from your supervisor, and it's talking about you, and it's saying, and this is part of Exhibit 2, Document 50, Your Honor. And it's saying, call received from Staton County, I'm sorry, the second paragraph. To my knowledge, there were not any calls from the pod stating the inmate was having further problems. Well, we'll have to back up and talk about that. But it says on 310, Lisa Armstrong, Andrea Skelton, that's you, were doing DD rounds in Bruner's pod when the deputy told them that he had been acting weird, like a mental patient. Now, the information that your supervisor would have had on that would have had to come from you? Is that right?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. What I'm trying to get a handle on is that after you not only prepared a statement,
Right.
or a brief memo at your supervisor's request, and I've got it, we can't see it. We just talked about that. That's 51 in Exhibit 2. But you also talked to your supervisor about what you observed, and she prepared an email on that. You understand that, don't you?
Correct. I just don't recall. I'm sure after rounds we went and spoke to her, but I'm still,
Okay.
as I said here, thinking that we did receive a call. I just didn't wasn't clear if it was me
Okay.
or Lisa received the
Well,
call.
this doesn't say you didn't receive a call. It
Right.
just indicates that after rounds that you went and seen him. So there could have been 2 contacts, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Or more.
Right.
Now, then it says, what I really wanted to focus on is that you were told that he was acting weird, like a mental patient. Was that always the information that you received from the deputies that you recall until you got there?
Right. If I remember right, it was more bizarre behavior. They weren't like he was weird or, acting weird. It was more bizarre behavior that he wasn't making sense or just bizarre behavior.
Now, let me talk to you about this first sentence where it says, to my knowledge, there were not any calls from the pod stating the inmate was having any further problems. I think that's referring to back up here, this first paragraph. So I want to visit about your knowledge on that. It says that there was a call received from Staton County on 3508 stating that inmate Bruner was weak, not eating for 2 days, and had blood in his stools. He was also scheduled to see a clinician on 3/6/2008, Charlie Fletcher. Mr. Bruner was brought back to Sedgwick County on 3/6/08 at 17:43. When the clinician pulled his schedule at 7:04, the inmate was still showing as out of county. He was rescheduled for 3/9/08 at 8 o'clock by Cassie Liu, CMA. The time set that unit clerk's schedule patients' clinics is 9:10 in the morning. Cassie Liu is a new employee who doesn't clerk on a regular basis, and scheduled Bruner to see the clinician at 8. Therefore, the patient did not show up on the clinician schedule. And that's to explain why it is that Mr. Bruner wasn't seen until, well, when you folks saw him on 3/10.
Just, excuse me, Judge, what are these, she has no knowledge of this. He's just testifying. I mean, there's nothing that she could not answer.
Well, I think, what are you doing here? Are you trying to refresh her memory, or are you trying?
Well, I'm trying to clarify this first sentence where it references her, no knowledge, that there is no knowledge of any calls in the pods stating the inmate was having further problems. But maybe I can get at it a different way, Your Honor, and help Mr. Feiger out. What I'm thinking is, or what I'm wondering about is, what information do you have about the prior history of Mr. Bruner when you went to see him?
I had none.
Okay. Now, there's another document that has been put into evidence, which is Exhibit 2, Document 75. And it's a statement that was made by Lisa Armstrong in an email that stated, the day after you folks saw Mr. Bruner, right?
Correct.
And she indicates that it was about 2 p.m. that we were doing rounds, and we were getting ready to leave the pod when a deputy asked us to see inmate Bruner, who was thought to be a mental subject. So that means this would suggest that maybe around 2 o'clock you're doing your rounds, you're getting ready to leave, and then you're being asked to see Mr. Bruner. Does that refresh your recollection? Still no.
Right. I don't
Okay.
want to say yes or no because I can't remember if we saw him after the 3 o'clock or at that time. So.
Okay. And doing rounds to see DD, let's talk about DD for a moment. That's people that are in detention, that they're in lockdown, right?
Correct.
And there are lots of pods in the Sedgwick County Jail. Not all of them are pods that have detention inmates, right?
Correct.
The detention inmates, are they always in the indirect pods?
I don't remember what the indirect pod is.
The ones where the deputies are in the booth, and as opposed to where the deputies are out with the inmates?
Believe so, yes.
And how long did it take you back then, roughly, to do a round of detention?
Anywhere from probably
Very.
45 minutes to an hour.
So odds are, sometime if you started at 2, and I'm not holding you to that, you're looking at maybe about 2:45 or 3 o'clock that you'd first be available
Correct.
to see somebody else.
Correct, but I'm almost positive we always did them at 3, but that's something I just have burned in my brain,
Okay.
so.
Now, she says that you and she, that is Ms. Armstrong, went in and saw Mr. Bruner, and she said, I made the decision to have the patient cleared by medical before mental health could continue with this patient. I was not sure at this point if the patient had a true mental health issue or a medical issue. Now, she was the trained nurse, right?
Correct.
To you, it looked like it was obviously a medical issue.
Yes, because he wasn't responding. But
Your point was, let's get him clear first and or by medical, and let's do it fast, right? She says, I went into the booth and using the booth deputy's phone to contact medical. And is that how it was happened? The nurse went and contacted
Yes.
medical? Okay. And did you then stay with Mr. Bruner until he was taken to the clinic?
I recall that I recall remembering the wheelchair come up, but we went ahead and proceed on finishing up rounds.
And if the records show at the clinic, if the records show the movement records, and if the daily activity logs show that he was moved out of the pod at about 3:25, a little bit actually after that, is that inconsistent with your memory? Or do you have a memory?
I'm thinking that we saw him about the 3 o'clock hour, so to me that seems like the time of day that it was.
If you saw him about 3 o'clock, and then if he's moved out around 3:25, that sounds about right, doesn't it?
I'm going to go with yes.
Okay. Now, when you saw Terry Bruner in the cell, he was not responding, and he wasn't coherent. He wouldn't respond to questions, right?
Correct.
And he was seated on his bed, and you've tried to describe that, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit more brave about this and see if I've got it right.
Okay.
You guys can stand up if you,
That's how I remember him, yes.
Now, there was no evidence of any fluids on the ground when you went in.
Not that I remember.
No vomit.
No,
That's something you would have remembered if it had been vomit on him.
I believe so.
No soiled sheets.
No,
No blood on the sheets.
no,
But you had a person that wasn't responding.
correct.
Now, an ambulance wasn't called right away.
No,
He wasn't taken immediately to the hospital.
I do not know about that.
When you and bad day here, Nurse Armstrong saw him, did you appreciate that he had a life-threatening condition?
Did I appreciate?
Were you thinking, here's a guy that needs to get to the hospital because his life's in danger?
I wasn't sure, so
I mean, it was more, we're not sure what's going on, he needs to be seen by a doctor, but not that we think this is an emergency where he needs to hop in an ambulance and go to the hospital right away.
I was just thinking that he needs to be seen by a doctor, was unsure of what was wrong with Mr. Bruner.
And if this were an obvious deal where you need to go to the clinic quicker, you could have said to a deputy, hit a code 1, and the clinic people would come scrambling down to see him, right?
Correct.
And neither you nor Nurse Armstrong asked the deputies to do a code 1.
No, we just called the clinic to say he needed to come down to the clinic because he was not responding.
Okay, I don't have anything else,
to us.
thanks.
redirect.
Thank you.
Okay.
It was obvious to you that he was sick, needed medical help.
It was obvious that he was incoherent, so yes.
Well, I'm saying, I don't want to just say, you've actually testified under oath that it was obvious to you that he was sick and that he needed medical attention.
Correct.
Right. And you're not a doctor.
I am not.
And the way he looked, if anyone looked at him at that time, I mean, you're not a doctor, it would be obvious the severity, not necessarily what was wrong with him, but that something serious was wrong with him,
Correct.
in your opinion. And it didn't look like he had suddenly become like that, did it? It looked like he had been that way for a while.
Your Honor,
That
I
I'm
think
not
that's
sure of.
Excuse me.
I think
What?
that's calling for a conclusion that's not proper for discipline.
Did it look to, I'll restate it, did it look to you that it suddenly had hit him, or that he had been sick for a while?
Same objection, Your Honor. It's calling for a conclusion. This witness is not.
You can ask what she observed, but
Right.
I'm not sure how she would know how long he had been sick, and you haven't established a foundation for testimony on that subject.
Well, just from an ordinary standpoint, I realize you're not a medical person now. Did this look like something that has suddenly happened to you? Do you know what I mean? Or did he have the appearance of somebody who had been sick for a while? Do you know what somebody looks like who's been sick for a while?
I've got multiple questions now, and it's an improper topic. This witness, there's no foundation for her to express an opinion on that. It would not be a proper lay opinion because it wouldn't be based on her own personal observations in any event.
I agree.
Nobody told you how long he'd been sick, right?
No.
Okay. I want you to assume after, and I apologize in advance. I'm not trying to embarrass you in any way, okay? But we've had testimony in this case, and a trained deputy, Hunt, came here yesterday and testified consistent with his report, which is in evidence. I want to show it to you, and I'm not trying to embarrass you.
Okay.
Deputy Hunt testified, according to his report here, that he was called for an escort to Pod 1 to the clinic. In other words, he was the one, after you left, who came and got Mr. Bruner. Okay? Upon arriving with a wheelchair, I went to cell 124 to get inmate Bruner, and the inmate was sitting on his bed, rocking and moaning. That's right after you left. Is that consistent with what you saw?
I saw him sitting on the bed like I testified to, but I never heard a word out of him or a moan.
Okay. Now, here's really the point I'm getting at, and again, I'm not trying to embarrass you. Right after you left, he said, because Mr. Chalmers asked you these questions just a moment ago, and I want to make clear we've had a lot of testimony about this, so we don't want there to be any confusion.
Your Honor, I don't think it's appropriate for him to make speeches as he's doing. I've asked that he just ask questions. I also present the speech he'd make, but I don't think when we say lots of testimony, that's necessarily accurate.
I agree. Let's just ask questions.
Yes, Your Honor. Inmate Brewer was very sweaty, and his jumpsuit was soiled with sweat. I also noticed that inmate Brewer had vomited on the floor. And Mr. Chalmers asked you if there was soiled linen, vomit on the floor. And this gentleman came right after you, so I wonder, is it just possible that you missed it?
I don't recall
Okay.
vomit
I
on
got
the
it.
floor.
You're not saying it wasn't there.
Right.
You just don't. Right. I want to make clear you're just not saying it wasn't there. You just don't
Right.
recall it. Okay.
Correct.
It's a long time ago.
It
was,
is.
And it was a very difficult situation for you, anyways. It was bad. What you saw wasn't good, was it?
Your Honor, I'm leading the witness, and
I'll withdraw the question.
Recross.
what makes you think he didn't just vomit after you left?
Like I said, sir, I do not
Yeah.
recall the vomits.
So your best memory is that there wasn't any vomit.
At this moment, yes.
Okay.
I don't remember that.
Appreciate it, thanks.
Anything else?
Nothing else.
Can this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, could we take a short break? I need a short break.
Yes, let's take a 15-minute recess until 11:25.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Court is in recess.